February 2022 meeting of the Natural Resource Committee is officially starting. So let's see. All right. I'll call to order. I did that. Okay. Adoption of the agenda. Anybody want to move anything around or have anything they want to add at this point, or? Doesn't look like it. Okay. So we're supposed to be electing the chair and vice chair. We have to do that apparently every year, so I'm willing to be the chair again if you guys will, if you want me. I'm more than willing to step aside and let somebody else do it. I hate being chairs, but I always tell people I'd rather be a sofa, you know. But I'm willing to do it again. Anybody interested in being the vice chair since we lost Mike? Sam is? Okay, great. So anybody else want to run against us? We could have a heated race here. Okay, so our slate is me as chair and Sam as the vice chair. Do we need to vote on? I don't remember how we vote. The last time I wasn't in the room because it was like I was up for re-election and I was up for the committee and I had to interview. It was really crazy. So
you know, I'm going to suggest if anyone has anything to add or anything to offer different. Otherwise, we'll just take it as a unanimous acceptance of the proposal for chair and vice chair. It's probably fine. Seeing none. All right.
I'll just say in absence of a vote that, yeah, I support that decision.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so are there any citizens? I don't see anybody from the community, so we don't have any of that public comment. So presentation of the comprehensive plan update. I'm really looking forward to this, and I'm going to admit right now I haven't looked at anything because I was in class from 8 till 4, and then I had to drive home from McMinnville and shove some food down.
Fair enough. I'm going to admit right now that I've had probably 3 weeks to sit with a project that's been in the pike for almost 2.5 years. So I'm going to kick off a very brief presentation, but really the goal for tonight is just to kind of orient you with what's been done to date and really tell you ways to get to offer comments post this meeting and up through the rest of the process and how to stay engaged from this point forward. So with that, I'm going to try my best to share my screen here. And find my all right. My apologies. I am having a little bit of technical difficulty.
You have a bar and it has a little green thing that says share screen.
I do. I just can't. Let's see. I just can't find that particular presentation.
Oh, yeah, that's always a
There we go. All right. Let's see. Okay. Thank you for your patience. So I'm going to assume everyone can see that on the screen. All right, great. So the comp plan update, the project name for this is OC 2040. So you'll probably see post this meeting going forward a lot of references to OC 2040, which is the city's effort to update the comp plan. We have 2 consultants on board and they have been working for about 2 years. The last time we updated the comp plan was in around 2004. And part of this process has been about a year-long visioning process. And we've then, commission approved the vision statement after about 1.5 years. And we're now in the goals and policies portion of the update. So what is a comprehensive plan? Local comprehensive plans are required by state law, and they have a key role in the formal comprehensive plan process approved by the state of Oregon. They not only reflect residents' desires and the vision for the community, but they are a roadmap for all future decision-making of current and future city commissions. The comprehensive plan is implemented through a variety of documents such as the Parks Master Plan, Transportation System Plans, Urban Growth Boundary, and the Zoning Code. So a way to think about it is whatever might be in the zoning code and the code we're going to talk about later for trees, that all has to filter and exist underneath and within the umbrella of the comprehensive plan and be consistent with it. So what you have here is kind of a demonstration to show how really as we start with a vision, and it's very aspirational and very broad, and then as we move through to the right across this slide, things become more specific. So the vision feeds into the goals, which are broad statements of purpose and and defines what the community wants to achieve. Policies then are clear statements guiding a specific course of action for decision makers to achieve that goal. We're in the blue and green process now, the goals and identifying goals and policies and refining those. Something that's not part of this project now, but will be a future item, is developing an implementation plan. And what that implementation plan is going to be is the actions, the things that can effectuate what's in the comp plan. So future code changes, updates to the TSP, things of that nature. And that is a separate project that will come after we adopt the comp plan. So 2 objectives for tonight. One is to review the outreach and engagement processes that we had to date. And 2 is really to get your initial feedback. Basically, are we on the right track? Is there something that we've overlooked? And so that's really it. We're not asking a lot for you tonight, just to kind of give you a first blush of what we've been doing to date. So project schedule, we had about a year long of the visioning process. And you'll see later in the statement in the presentation what the outcome of that vision statement process was. We're in the update of the comprehensive plan process now, which is creating the goals and policies. And then hopefully come late spring, early summer, we'll be in the adoption process. All right, so what type of outreach and engagement have we done to date? So we had 4 comprehensive plan summits. Let's see. There was basically what these were 4 different online summits. They were specific to a certain topic. You'll see as we talk the different themes that are part of the comprehensive plan. So they were specific to a particular theme, and they allowed applicants to have dialogue with staff and offer comments. They had about between 20 and 60 attendees per summit. Post summit, each summit, we had a coffee and comp plan drop-in series, which meant residents could come to our offices and sit with us on one-on-one and just ask any questions, any follow-up dialogue they wanted to have. And each of these had between 1 and 5 visitors. We also had a community-wide online survey, which received approximately 140 responses. And then we met 11 times with our project advisory team. And I'm not sure if anyone on the committee was part of that team. Okay, great. Chris, you are. So yeah, they met about approximately, I think you might have met even, I think we have 1 more meeting, which will come after we have our workshop with the City Commission. But let's go from there. So the the community-wide vision was adopted by Oregon City Commission on August 4th, 2021. And there was 4 themes. They included healthy and welcoming communities, diverse economy, connected infrastructure, and protected environment. So within each of these themes, there are the goals under each of those. Healthy and welcoming communities, they have identified 4 key goals. diverse and inclusive community engagement, protecting and acknowledging historic and cultural resources, safe and healthy and comfortable neighborhoods, and integrated diversity, equity, and inclusive approaches. There's a lot of verbiage on these slides. I'm not going to go into each policy, but after I'm done, if you want to revisit any of these, I'd be happy to go back and provide more information on those. Second theme was diverse economy. And the goals, 4 goals under this is dynamic, ecologically sound, and socially equitable economy. 2, housing options for all residents. 3, maintaining an urban growth boundary. And 4, sustainable site design and construction practices. The third theme was connected infrastructure, includes 4 goals as well. There's a theme: safe, equitable, multimodal transportation systems, maintaining and improving public facilities and infrastructure. 3, ensuring health and safety through comprehensive service provision. And 4, resiliency and energy conservation. And the last theme, what might be the most pertinent to this group, was protected environment. And there were 3 goals identified under this theme. 1, system of trails, parks, and recreational amenities. 2, function, health, and diversity of natural resources and ecosystems, and mitigate natural hazard risk and manage rapid response and recovery. So where we are now is we have kicked off an online forum that will be live through March 14th. When you go to the forum, you'll see it's kind of each theme and each goal has a page which allow you to input comments, ask questions. We're going to pull all that responses, retool and rework the goals and policies in those areas that need it based on the response. And then we'll come back for further comment and bring those back to you at another date. So sneak peek of what's to come. You probably saw in your packet, you had, it's just like just the goals and policies, which is a 4-page little sheet that's by far not the outcome of the comprehensive plan update. What our consultants will be working on next is a very, it's a shift. I don't know if you've looked at our comp plan that we have today. It's a very wordy document. Comp plans have changed a lot over the years. The vision for the new comp plan will include lots of graphics, be very user-friendly. Folks should be able to open it up and really get a sense of what the vision and the goals for the community is, without having to delve into the very lengthy and wordy document we have today. So I do want to acknowledge that there's far fewer goals and policies in the proposed draft comp plan than there are in the current comp plan, and that was by design. The intention was to really streamline that and focus in on what's important. So it is a far fewer policies, but the reason for that too is twofold. One, it was to streamline the process some, but a lot of the policies in our comp plan today are actually implementation and action items. And so we want to pull all that out and just have the policies live in the comp plan, and all those action items will be in a future document. So next steps, the forum is live through March 14th, and that would be your place to go in and offer comment. Of course, you can also offer it to Aquila or staff directly as well. We're going through now, we're presenting to city groups and committees, and that'll be done and wrapped up in March. And then we're going back to a work session with the Planning Commission and City Commission in March as well. So with that, be happy to go back to any other slide or see if I can answer any questions for you.
I'd kind of like to go back to the slide on the environmental stuff. I noticed that the
Absolutely.
one before that, the one before that actually talked about climate change in a couple of places. So, and actually the connected infrastructure has a carbon footprint reduction under one. And then 3 had emergency preparedness and climate change resiliency, and 4 has like green sustainable stuff for stormwater and development and climate friendly and equitable communities. And so I don't remember seeing anything about climate change in the 4th one. But I couldn't read those very fast. So maybe go to the environmental one.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I do think most climate change policies right now live under the infrastructure goal.
There's the emergency preparedness. I don't know, it just seems like we're missing an opportunity because that's probably the biggest threat facing everything right now is what happens with climate change. And it almost seems like somewhere in here, there needs to be something about planning for environmental resiliency, and street trees are part of that, but, the type of development we do, the size of the streets. I mean, they repaved the street in front of my house and it's a super wide street and I don't know why it's so wide. And, a lot of cities are actually making streets less wide. And I heard that it's because the fire trucks need to get up it, but the block above me is much more narrow and fire trucks don't have any problem getting up on that one. So, it's like, in fact, they added more paved surfaces when they redid it than they had before because they made the sidewalks bigger and not wider for people, but when they got to the corners, there had been places where there was green and people had gardens there and they took all that out and put sidewalk in. So they actually increased the amount of concrete, which increases runoff, which they did a lot of stuff that I think was not well planned in terms of looking at the impact on the environment. And it's too late to undo that now. And that was probably planned years ago before it was a big issue, but it just seems like there needs to be something more in this bullet point. Everybody else has 4 and we get 3. And so the first thing I noticed was everybody had 4 but us. I'm like, But I really would like to see something in here on climate change. So you're telling me I should go into the website?
No, I mean, I will certainly capture the feedback from today, but if there's things you think about later, then that would be the forum would be the best place for you to do that. But I think that's good feedback that I will make sure gets back to our consultants as well.
Right.
I could speak to this a little bit. Since I've been in this since before last summer, and I could say that everything that we have here has been distilled from a kind of very widespread effort to try to involve all of the community voices in this. I mean, our very first steps were to basically go out canvassing and looking for groups that would be interested in having like community level discussions or just getting people interested in participating in the surveys. And then, that turned into more and more concentrated groups and, kind of focused discussions. And from what I recall, I remember seeing a fair number of you in this specific discussion group that we had as the project advisory team some months ago. It was probably 3 or 4 months ago now. I'm having a hard time tracking it. But they did seem to really kind of simplify the language. I do recall there being an imperative to kind of insert language around climate policy. And it looks like it kind of eked its way into a couple of these fields. And of course, it's kind of related indirectly to everything that increases the footprint of natural resources. Perhaps we should aim for a 4th point that, aims to make all of these things, rather than some distant indirect effect, something that guides our decisions in how we actually expand this system of natural resources and protect it. sorry if that was somewhat rambling, but I don't know. Do we have, does anybody else feel that we should add kind of direct language to this? I mean, I feel like it kind of indirectly gets at it, but do we need to be kind of like more on point with it?
I think that was what I really think we need like maybe a fourth point that somehow sums up the commitment of the city to do things with the environment to help mitigate and reduce the impact of climate change in the future, because it's the biggie.
Mhm.
And so just the indirect language to me is not really getting at what needs to be, what needs to happen, because this is not something we can do. Oh, maybe in 2040 we'll redo the plan and we'll add climate change. That's too late. We're already seeing massive impacts from climate change already, and it's only going to get worse without immediate and substantial actions by everybody. So I'd like to see, I think this would be a place to put a fourth step, and I'm not sure how to word it right now. Chris, you were on all the committees and the discussions. You might have a better idea of what we would like to see worded there.
Mhm. Well, the way that the discussions worked, it was kind of like throwing spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks, you know? But from what I'm seeing here, it kind of refers to, climate change is this like emergent condition that we just kind of respond to. It's this very kind of reactionary language, whereas maybe, we can kind of change that tact and think of it as, what can we do to actually mitigate, you know, these emergent changes rather than just respond to them in real time. So if I had any suggestion personally that I would make, it would be along those lines. It would be about, forward thinking rather than, how do we just deal with the emergencies and catastrophes that are a result of these things.
Yeah,
So maybe something that is maybe feeding the consultant something that says we need something to show climate change to show up as a proactive approach to climate change.
to mitigate it and help reduce it before, the impacts of it, rather than just responding to what happens. I mean, wildfires are only going to get worse, and I spent a week plus in a level 2 evacuation in parts of Oregon City, out toward Beaver Creek, we're in a level 1. And so I know that not doing something to mitigate climate change has an immediate impact on these communities. We were lucky because the weather changed and the fires didn't merge, because if those fires had merged outside of Molalla, I may not have a house now. And I'm in the McLaughlin historical neighborhood, because we're seeing that houses are fuel. They don't need forests to have forest fires. Houses burn just as well because they're wood and flammable materials. So I think we really need to put something in here that is proactive.
So I will certainly add that to the list for the consultants. I would suggest then at a post meeting, if you think about some language some more and you kind of noodle on it a little bit, then the forum would be the place to go in and kind of reiterate. And maybe if you think of some language that might have popped into your head as we go along, that would be a good place so that we can also go back and look at that. But I think those are very good comments that I will add there. And I don't know why there was only 3. I wasn't part of that process, but it was the first thing I kind of noticed as well. So
Oh, well,
I'm
the
not
impact
sure.
is not as important because there's only 3.
No, I don't think that's the
And
case,
I
but don't know what
I agree I know that wasn't what they were thinking. But I also think it's a big mistake to not have something about being proactive with climate change.
Okay.
Because it makes our community, to me, I look at this and it's like, oh, well, Oregon City really doesn't give a shit about it. So, and I know we do. So I think we need to, I think that I would think it would make the city look better to have something direct in there about being proactive and helping mitigate climate change and reduce it from happening. Again, I have COVID brain, so language is not really good right now, but.
Is there any other slides I can revisit for you or any other items that you might want to
Would it be
dive
possible
into
to
today?
share this PowerPoint with the committee?
Sure. Yeah.
Because I'd like to look at it more before I go in and do the forum. I'd like to maybe look at this a little bit more. Maybe
Well,
I
and I
with some language when my brain wasn't so tired and send it to the rest of the committee and have other people weigh in on language because my rough drafts are sometimes really rough. And so,
I can absolutely do that. And I would just add, these are just kind of, I just pulled out some bullets. So please also look at the actual goals and policies that were in part of your packet. There's a lot more language in those than in the slides.
right. And there may be something there that just didn't get captured on this. I don't know.
I don't think it's getting to where, you know, what I'm hearing this evening as far as a more direct statement regarding climate change and mitigating and being proactive in that regard. I do think there's opportunities to explore adding some additional language, whether it results in a fourth goal or not, I don't know, but I do think that's something that maybe isn't there that I'm hearing probably should be.
Yeah, I really think it should be.
I have a question or a comment.
Yes, Sam.
So just looking at all the bullets, and I don't know if it's a semantic point or not, but it says protected environment. And I'm curious if maybe in the more descriptive plan document, it talks more specifically about, oh, it does say, it says protect and enhance the urban forest canopy, but I'm not seeing, oh, and I see protect rivers and creeks, but I'm curious if we can, sorry, kind of enhance the protection discussion, since we're talking about environment, we have improved air quality. It would be good to kind of talk about it as a protective measure as well as improvement. So I'm curious if they can, I just want to kind of make it more, you know, it follows what it's talking about. So it says protected environment, and it has measures in there that talk about protecting these particular resources. Maybe that can be pulled into, it doesn't necessarily need to be, but pulled into a fourth category that highlights the protection emphasis, if that makes any sense. I don't know if it's just reorganizing or not to just make it symmetrical with all the other goals. But I feel like that kind of helps to, go to where Nancy was talking about, having a guidance that talks about mitigating and prevent and reducing climate impacts.
I mean, I
And
did something with the city where one of the goals is to reduce the carbon emissions from Oregon City. The
right,
city of Oregon City, as well as doing what they can for the citizens to also reduce that.
right. So yeah, not only protecting what we currently have in terms of natural resources, but also enhancing them, improving them. And that also goes towards city operations and what contributions they have, because the city can do a lot within their own field sphere of influence. It's a much more difficult step to do it for the private citizen or the private business. So it'd be curious to see what goals and policies the consultants have come up with that can address that, because I don't know if Oregon City itself is a major contributor to climate change impacts compared to like the wider community. So I'd be curious to see just a discussion or points about that.
But when I read this, I don't see anything about the city making any attempt to reduce their carbon footprint, which to me is that's a big red flag right now. So I think the city one of the goals needs to be to reduce the carbon footprint of the city, and also, the city itself, the government, but also to help businesses and citizens, to reduce their carbon footprints, maybe not force them, not saying force them to do it, but help them. So I know Portland's done a lot of stuff to try and help the citizens in Portland reduce their carbon footprints through a number of different things. I know they've done stuff with PGE and some of the other electric companies to help get solar panels on more houses. And so there's things that can be done that will encourage citizens to do things that I'd like to see that as part of the goal for the city.
Okay. So
Yeah, I
think-
agree.
And you're thinking that would be all under the umbrella of a fourth goal. I think probably makes sense.
Yeah.
Right. Is there any other comments or thoughts now? Or do we want to go ahead and move on?
Yeah. Anybody comments? Anybody want to say anything else? Okay, so street trees. We're back to street trees. The ever popular street trees. Someday we'll get done with that.
All right, I'm gonna suggest maybe we go ahead and, if it's possible, could we talk the diagram first? I know Dante's here and that's what he's largely here to talk about, but I don't know if you want to do that first since he had to sit through.
Do you want me to jump in?
Go for it.
So for you guys that don't know me, my name is Dante Posadas. I'm the right-of-way and construction manager for the city. I oversee all the franchise utilities and I oversee all of the development construction, which includes street trees. Generally, the planning department does the approval of the street tree plans, and they do the approval of the required amount of trees for the land use type decisions. But it's the trees are in the right of way, so at the end of the day, it's something that the Public Works Department is making sure it gets installed per standard and making sure it gets installed in a sustainable way. And I work for the Public Works Department. We oversee the standards, and Teresa, can I share? We oversee the standards and we do an annual update of all our standards. In our last meetings, we have gotten the feedback that you guys gave to us, and we edited our drawing to show some of that work. We agreed that we would have 24-inch commercial engineered root barrier. You guys suggested an 18-inch there. We would like a 24-inch just because of the depth of our road subbase, and to ensure that we're not disturbing the natural soil under our subbase to cause issues with the curve and stuff like that. That's why we kept the 24. What we did do is we moved the root barrier from all sides to be placed 20 feet along any impervious surface. So it would be placed 20 feet along the sidewalk and 20 feet along the back of curb. That would allow the route to have at least the maximum allowed area within that furniture zone. And that changes per city code, the furniture zone, depending on what type of street you're on. Generally, new development today does not allow a furniture zone or a planter strip that's less than 5 feet. So all our new development will be a planter strip that's 5.5 feet. We will be installing the root, or we will be installing the tree as shown here with a hand tan pedestal and a little kind of drop to allow for the root ball not to flood. We talked about the placement of the root trunk. We wanted an inch above finished grade. And that will also have some 2 to 4 inch unsettled bark mulch on top, not on top of the trunk, but next to the trunk. You guys had like a little berm. We feel like the 2 to 4 inches is kind of like that berm. And then the other things that were on your edit, I believe, was the hand tamped soil. And then you guys wanted to move the root barrier to the back of the curb. We're considering that still. We feel like in arterial sections, which are the major roads, it may be a little bit harder to move it to the back of the curb, just because those roads and the sub bases that are built on those roads are a little more structural. But we do recognize that we want to make the planter strip as wide as possible to allow the root to actually have enough room to grow, and to actually have, like, if it's a 2-inch caliber tree, right, that root ball is already a significant size if it's a 5-foot planter strip. And if we're moving the root barrier a foot from the back of the curb, we're cutting an extra foot of where that root would thrive in. So we agree that there's something there. We just don't know how to show it for all our trees. And we also wanted to get a good feel as to what the street tree list would look like finalized when we decide like what should go in like a 3-foot planter or a 5-foot planter. Like we agree that in a 3-foot planter, the root barrier should probably be at the back of the curb, just because it's going to be impossible to get anything in there to actually grow. And it's not impossible, right? But it's not. It also causes further issues with the other infrastructure that's there, say the sidewalk or whatever. So this is where we landed. This has been adopted by our public works standards. We do this every year. As you can see, 19, 21, 22, they all get, if it gets updated, it gets placed here. And we look at all our in-house standards. We actually look at all of our in-house standards every 6 months. And then we do one adoption every year, depending on how badly a change is needed. So that's kind of what I got for you guys. You guys have questions, concerns, thoughts? I really think that we're still working on it, and it's kind of a moving target. You just like the street tree list, like what's in the best interest of the community to have a tree that's in a 2-foot or a 3-foot planter section, or to not have that there and find a more viable spot to put that tree. But this is where we're at now. We feel like we can definitely implement this with our development community. All new development should have the 5.5-foot planter strip. So that would allow for about a 4-foot area for the tree to be planted in. On arterial roads, it's an 8-foot planter strip area. So that would even allow for more area for those trees to be installed. So that's really where we're at. I will say that we're also looking at our tree grate detail. We don't have an established tree grate detail. This is the trees that would be installed on curb tight sidewalk. And those areas would be like Main Street or some areas on Myers or Malala. We installed all of our trees on the new Malala project per the Malala streetscape standards, but those were adopted, I don't know what year those were adopted in, so they do have some, we do have to merge our new standards with those. And we're looking at doing all of that, and we're hopeful to get a tree grade standard adopted probably sometime in July. Do I have any questions? Thoughts?
Chris, you were the one who did the modifications to it. So you know more about this than I think any of the rest of us. So I'd kind of like to hear your opinion of if you think this is good or if it'll work or.
You want me to show you the
Comparison?
markup, the comparison?
Yes, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Try and find it. Option.
I can get that from you.
Can you see that? Sorry.
Yes.
Okay, so soil berm 3 to 5 inches.
Mhm.
We tried to address that with ensuring that the root ball gets installed an inch below the surface, and that we're putting 2 to 4 inches of mulch around here. I mean, that's the way that they've been installed within Oregon City for a long time. I mean, the berm may be, what's your thoughts, I guess?
I wouldn't say that the berm is essential. It could even be just like a temporary thing that you can get just with a mulch ring, which just ensures the survivability of fresh plantings, just, as far as retaining the moisture and the watering. So that's the thought there. And from what I've seen in the park system, they do implement the mulch ring. So it's something that they seem to be aware of. That's a lesser concern. Really, the only thing that I would advocate for is I don't see a need for a root barrier on both sides of the tree. I understand it completely on the sidewalk side. That seems to be more susceptible to uplift. But on the curb side, that typically has like a much deeper footing and is generally just beefier. And I don't know, in my experience, and feel free to push back on this, I haven't seen much damage on the street side. And all it does is kind of restrict root space. And just in my opinion, that is extra space that the tree would benefit from. And it doesn't really do much to, you know, mitigate much damage that Public Works would deal with. I mean,
So I think we view it maybe a little different. So I've worked for Oregon City for 4 years now,
Mhm.
and I've had two very distinct instances where the trees were street trees that had grown into the street, and the sidewalk was messed up also, but the street tree caused a lot of damage to the road, and it caused damage to like the utilities that were in the road.
Mhm.
So I get where the desire is to ensure the tree has enough room to live,
Mhm.
right? But I don't think that my director or the operations teams would agree with not protecting the road. I mean, we invest a lot of infrastructure and work into ensuring those roads are, you know, decent shape and stuff like that. So I don't think that the department would be pro moving that root barrier from the curbside. I mean, in the
But that is,
past, we haven't had the root barrier on the sidewalk side, but we've always had the root barrier on the curbside, and we've always looked at, like, have inspected the installation of the root barrier.
mhm.
What
And,
is,
you know,
okay.
and I would point out that we are, you know, kind of taking a very detailed look at our new street tree list. And we're coming up for specific lists for different planting areas, you know, different widths of that planting median. And it essentially scales down the more restricted it becomes. So if I were to push back at all, I would say that perhaps it's something that you maybe not codify in your drawings, but would definitely make a kind of case by case judgment of whether or not it would be appropriate to use it. Because I also view it as just like, you know, an unnecessary step in material cost. Where, you know, if you have a smaller tree, you know, it would just be kind of a waste of resources to use it in the first place. That in addition to, you know, what it would do to limit the tree's growth.
I mean, generally, we have to install 2-inch caliber trees per city code. And then generally those planter strips per development, whenever we do review of development, those widths are codified. So when we install these trees, all of the trees that will be installed using this standard, right, are new development trees. These trees will have a minimum of 5.5 foot planter strip. In the 5.5 foot areas, we are thinking about putting that root barrier right up against the curb so that it has more width. So I agree with you that it needs more width. I just don't necessarily, it just scares an engineer to not protect the the road and the utility infrastructure that's in the road. And the city, I mean, we all pay for pavement maintenance, utility funds. We all pay for utilities to be installed. We all, like, we're a big community together in that. So I don't think that moving the root barrier from the curb is going to be an option that the Public Works Department would support. I do think that we would, and we are looking at moving that root barrier to the back of curb to allow for a 5 foot footprint for that area. So
Okay, well,
I'm
just for
I'm not
clarity,
trying to push back on you hard. I just don't. I think that there's other like issues and thought processes in there. Like how many years, like right now, every time we overlay a road, we expect it to be 20 to 30 years of life. If we overlay a road and we don't put root barrier, or we build a new road and we don't put root barrier, and a tree comes in and affects that all affects our pavement utility maintenances, it affects the utilities that are under the road, and those costs are generated from how much we actually have to do.
oh, I understand. And, you got to understand too, that, I'm coming at it from a standpoint that the trees themselves are also, a vital part of the infrastructure, which are, oftentimes sidelined. And it's worth it just to spend some time and effort in the beginning to ensure their survivability, because you really start getting benefits from them, in maturity. But the average lifetime of a street tree is woefully less than that, most of the time, because, their planting conditions suffer. So all I'm saying is that, it's worth taking the time and effort to look at it, to make sure these things actually make it to maturity. But, again, taking your point, not at the expense of either of other vital infrastructure.
But I agree with you in that maybe that 24-inch root barrier, maybe it's a by location thought process. I agree that the 2.5 or the 3 foot areas, the areas in McLaughlin, the areas in the some of the older Park Place neighborhoods, the areas in the areas like some of the older South End areas, they don't have the 5 foot planter strip, right? So
Right.
for us to
it's tough.
already confine, a curb and the sidewalk, and then you have another foot or whatever with the root barrier, that's tough. But
yeah, and I agree, man. And I live in the McLaughlin neighborhood, and I've seen some atrocious conditions. And a lot of it was just from planting the wrong tree in the wrong place, things that we would never promote moving forward. So, I mean, we are kind of taking a two-pronged approach here. It's about using the proper planting and then creating the proper planting conditions. So yeah, we're doing what we can to make your job easier.
And we're looking, I mean, we're actively involved with the planning department on those lists. Like we make sure that we're not, that when a tree is planted today, right? Today on a development, when a tree is planted is after all the infrastructure has been built.
Mhm.
The road all the utilities get built first, all the underground utilities, then the road gets built. And then they start building sidewalk, or then they start building the houses, and then they start building the sidewalk, and then they put in the tree. And we, in the past, the city hasn't had the capability to just go out there and see that tree be installed, because there was no uniform time as to when those trees would be installed, and there was no real inspection out there. Today, what is happening is that we go out after the subdivision has been installed, and when the houses are being built, the building division goes out. They look at the tree, they make sure that tree is the right type. And then at the 2-year warranty of the subdivision, the Public Works Division, well, every subdivision has a 2-year warranty that they have to abide to after they've built public infrastructure. And then at the 2-year warranty, our division goes out and makes sure that root barrier is installed correctly, make sure that the root of the tree is installed correctly, and that we have the stakes and all of the root barrier along the impervious surfaces. That is what we're doing today. So yeah, like in the McLaughlin, you said it's really a lot of bad trees, bad installations. Today, you guys, along with planning and public works, are working on the tree list, getting that tied in, and on our installation side, we've set processes to not allow for poor installations. And that is where this standard comes in.
Understood. Yeah, and just for clarity, are we talking about the root barrier on the curb side being flush against the curb, or kind of offset by 12 inches as we're seeing in this drawing?
So for clarity, we are on big arterial roads, we still feel like the 12 inches is necessary.
Okay,
On
so it's
local roads that are most development, right? Local
Mhm.
small roads in most new developments, we are looking at moving that root barrier to the back of curb.
okay. Yeah, so I would say that that condition alone kind of warrants a case-by-case decision on where to place the root barrier.
And
Might
that's
affect the
why
standard drawing.
yeah, that's why we're trying to figure out where those conditions go and then adjust the drawing adequately.
Okay, understood. Well, yeah, I mean, y'all seem to have a good handle on it, and I would be very interested in, us being pulled into the conversation when y'all are making the standard drawings for tree wells, and maybe even look at the option for structural soils, which could help to ensure the survivability of trees in the urban condition, and also, kind of mitigate the damage to the sidewalks and the streets.
You were
So-
thinking a structural soil thought process for the grates or for this also?
Yeah, for the grapes and like very restrained urban conditions. I think with
Yeah.
Main Street,
Yeah.
where tree wells would be appropriate.
I mean, I'm sure you've noticed the Main Street has like a couple of trees that have been taken out lately.
A little bit, yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're trying to make sure that they go back correctly and aren't causing the issues that they're causing. I know that in front of like New Hings, there's a bunch of ADA issues, and they just took out a tree. So yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. I mean, it's a moving target, and we're trying to ensure that we are being the best steward to the tree canopy that we can be, while also understanding the infrastructure limitations and the limitations of the area where we want to put a tree too. Like it's easy to plant a tree in a field and let it grow and make it a beautiful canopy, but it's kind of hard to plant a tree in a 2-foot planter strip and have it turn out to be the beautiful tree that we want it to be. So
Yeah, I hear you.
yeah. So I this is where we're at now, right? This drawing where we've stopped squaring the trees with root barrier on all sides. We are only doing it on the curb side and the sidewalk side. This shows the 12 inches off, but that is a moving condition depending on the type of street, and we're working towards finalizing a standard that shows that, or or identifies that a little better. And then we did do the hand tamp pedestal with the little drops to make sure that the root wasn't flooding. And then we still have the 15 feet from street lights, 5 from hydrants, intersections, and all other public utilities 5 feet.
No pushback there. Yeah, I want to thank you for taking our feedback on this and for being flexible in regards to the root barrier on the curbside.
At the end of the day, I'm not a tree expert, right? Like
Mhm.
I know I'm an engineer by trade, and I manage the franchise utilities for the city. So at the end of the day, I'm trying to use all the resources that we can to make sure that the infrastructure is sustainable. Because
Gotcha.
we just passed the sidewalk, or if you follow the city commission just passed the sidewalk program for all of these trees that are causing issues with sidewalks. And our department is funding a $200,000 program for any homeowner that has taken out a permit in the last, or forever, that had issues with sidewalks because of trees. And the city is granting or paying out grants to those homeowners that have had to do sidewalk changes because of trees. So yeah, it's our main goal to get this dialed in enough, or know, or have at least enough data to make smart decisions, to have the tree survive and have a beautiful canopy, but also to not cause other issues within the community or within the public infrastructure. That's our goal.
That's very respectable. And yeah, again, thanks for working with us on this drawing and making the changes.
No problem. And I'll for sure get with Aquila on our tree grade design, and we can probably put it on one of, I don't know, maybe next month or something, y'all's agenda, and we can maybe talk, or not maybe, we can talk through it and make sure that, you know, there's at least some community expertise that talks through those things too.
Yeah, because there's definitely some cost benefit warranted when it comes to, you know, considering structural soils or really any other system for urban street trees. So yeah, it's best to come at it, you know, well informed.
Yeah, I agree. And I for sure will put it on one of your agendas, and I will be here for it.
Cool. Well, thanks, man.
Thanks, Don.
Welcome.
You've been a big help and really good at explaining things to some of us who, like when Chris wasn't here last time, we had no idea. And you did a good job of explaining things. So I appreciate it.
Thanks, Nancy. The other, or do you have something else on the agenda that, or what's next on the
Yeah,
agenda?
street tree list.
Do you mind if I just do a quick update on the forester and maybe jump
that'd
out
be-
of here?
That'd be wonderful. Yeah, we'd love
Is that
that.
okay, Nancy?
That's wonderful. No, I'm not muted.
So I know you guys have been talking to the planning department about an urban forester position in the city. Where that is currently is we've reached out to OD, the Oregon Department of Forestry, and Portland and a couple other cities about their job descriptions. We've gotten a bunch of their job descriptions, and we have kind of mashed those together to get a description that we feel is what Oregon City's community would benefit from. That includes doing like some plan reviews for trees, being a steward to the community tree canopy, and also like understanding the programs that like Tree City USA and all of those programs that the city views as a vital part of our infrastructure. But that's that's at the director, my director level right now. I don't know how we will proceed on if that will be a city position or if that will be consultants doing the job. But I think that it may go to a city commission work session at some point in March or April to look at the economics and look at how much resources the city needs in the regard. So I'm sure there will be public comment periods and stuff like that. So just be aware that that's on our horizon, and that is something that I have been working. Any questions on that? Can't hear you, Sam.
Thanks. I was just going to offer that if anyone at the commission or on planning is curious to interview with some excellent urban foresters, I'm happy to connect you to some. ODF also has that dialed in as well. It might be valuable to just kind of talk to one and learn what their role is like day to day, how they interact with the commission, how they interact with the public, and how they interact with other municipal departments. It might be valuable just kind of get, a sit down coffee chat or something like that with some current urban foresters that are doing excellent work, in my opinion. And that might be helpful to just kind of get a picture of what their roles look like and how it might mesh with your this search.
So I am fully on board with that thought process, and I think we may need a little bit more direction from our directors and maybe from the city commission, but I do think that prior to doing any hiring or anything like that, we would sit down with somebody from ODF to just really understand the day in and day out, and maybe what other programs or what they can offer and how we can ensure that the person we hire or the consultants that we work with are in that realm. So yeah, Sam, I think I will probably be the point person on that. I will probably be the person that's presenting to the commission and stuff like that on that. So if you want, I know we've already had a couple of emails with ODF, but if you would like to give me, I forgot her name, but I think it was Catherine. But do you think I should just reach out to her, or do you think I should? What do you?
Kristen is the
Kristen,
current
sorry.
manager at ODF's Urban and Community Forestry Program, and she knows all the same. She knows even more people than me, because most of these urban foresters are working in communities that are Tree City USA. So, or ODF is directly administers Tree City USA for the Arbor Day Foundation, so they know who everybody is. But if you would like just me directly giving you an email, an introduction to some of the folks that I think exhibit not only knowledge, but also excellence in this, role, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, for sure. Like any resources that you feel would be beneficial to our search or to our thought process, I am happy to engage and happy to listen, do a lunch or whatever we need to do. Because we want to just make sure that we want to make sure that we're getting somebody that's going to be an asset to the community, and somebody that's, somebody that fits within the, I don't know, it's just a lot. There's a lot there.
Understood. Well,
Yeah.
I'll send you some emails.
Okay.
Email
thanks, Sam.
names and introductions.
Yeah, thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Dante.
Is there any other questions for me, guys?
Don't think so.
Stay and listen to the street tree discussion and see what you think. But, you know, you're also welcome to leave. You don't have to stay.
I'll stay on for a second. I just wanted to make sure that there's no questions on the detail or anything like that.
I'm just happy to see us actually seriously considering an urban forester because we've been trying to push for that for years and getting nowhere. And I think that storm last February really was a benefit to that.
Yeah, I got some trees through my roof, but
I still have huge branches coming out of my walnut that I know were broken off last February. They've just been hanging up there. We had that one windstorm and they're all in my garden. I'm like, oh.
okay.
Okay, so should we do-
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thank
But
you.
I'll stay for
Thanks,
the
Dante.
street tree list talk.
Okay, yeah, you are a great help, so thank you. You want to share the street tree and then I'll let Sam take it.
Sure. I would just, while I'm making my efforts to do this, I wanted to note that Aquila has joined the call. So
Hi,
she's
Quill.
So-
also here.
Good evening. It's nice to see Nancy and Samantha again, and nice to meet Devin and Brian and Chris. Yeah, and I'm Aquila Hurd-Ravitch, the interim community development director, and I'll be your staff liaison for a little while.
All right, thank you. And I'm gonna go ahead and try to share. There was an update. I hope you all got to see that. I updated the packet with some of the revisions that Sam had made. So hopefully you can all see that. And
We blow it
with
up a little bit.
I can try.
That's good. Yeah, okay,
That might be a little too much, maybe.
that's great.
Is that good? Okay.
Thank you very much. Apologies that it doesn't look as nice as previous iterations. But I took into consideration Dante and John's from planning and public works, the concerns about this 2.5 foot to 3 foot planting strip, and some of the language describing the category. So Dante, I hope this rewording captures what you wrote. I wrote a note, so it might not, reflect exactly what your thoughts were, but I changed it from recommended to options. I think that's what you had mentioned. So I just changed the language there to kind of couch the direct specificity of the trees in these really tight, kind of not optimal tree planting spots. So
I think that's the thought there, right? The 2.5 to 3 is not an optimal tree size area for
Right.
any 2-inch caliber tree, right? And that's what we require per code. So what we want to do is not say, hey, the city approves these. Instead, we want to say the city, these are your options that the city finds would do okay in these areas. And I think by saying options, you are more allowing the homeowner to understand that there could be potential issues with them planting in the 2.5 foot area.
Does the code need to be changed, city code, so that right now, I think if you cut a tree down, you're required to plant another tree in there. Should the city code be changed so that you don't have to replant a tree in this really, really narrow space, but you could if you wanted to, with the idea that these were options and there could be issues?
I think that there's options for where that tree can be replanted. Like sometimes we allow for that tree to be planted on private property. But yeah, yes, there is some city code that could potentially like lessen the thought process here, or make the thought process a little bit more direct, right?
Right, right.
But that's a planning question. Sorry if I jumped in there.
No, I was into like, but you know, it's like, should the city be telling people they have to replant in these little tiny strips? And like, if you told me I had to plant in my yard, I don't have any rooms for it. I've planted so many trees in my yard, I couldn't put another tree in anywhere, or I would have one in there. So, you know, and I think I have a 3-foot planting strip. So I'm in McLaughlin, so, you know.
Yeah, all the older areas, right?
Right.
Those are the, and we're not, like this list is generally being used by new development, right?
Right,
Like we're not really, when a homeowner goes into planning and does one tree, that's why we want the option, right? But when a development comes through and they have to do the recommended within the 5 feet, then we want to be really directive that these are the recommended within the 5 feet.
right. Yeah. I just worry about people planting things in here thinking that this is okay, and maybe it's not such an okay idea. So, but yeah.
And I think
Thank
that's
you,
where we
Sue.
left it last time, is that we were wanting y'all to discuss a little bit more whether it was your position that maybe we don't require replanting within those very narrow planting strips. And if folks want to voluntarily do so, they can potentially select from this list, or we can come up with some ways to encourage that to be done on site versus in the right of way. But that would need to be a recommendation for a code change, because it is required today.
So the city might want to consider modifying the code to not require replanting in these really narrow strips, or if they do want to plant, that they could put one of these in, or they could put, again, something on private property. So they knew there were options besides, because I don't know that people really realize that there's options at this point.
May I ask a quick question? I noticed that there's 14 pages. Are there more street tree recommendations and options that Sam was going to take us through?
Yeah,
Or is the focus on the
Well,
2.5 to
it's-
3?
Sam did a lot of this work, but there's different street tree options for different size planting strips. So that
Okay,
that actually do have a fairly substantial root system are going into a much bigger spot than trees like
Mhm.
this that have a very small potential root.
so the main changes were to these, to the 2.5 foot to 3 foot planter strip.
Correct. So
Okay.
compared to the last version that we looked at last time and that most folks saw before, was there was a small handful of trees that were above 30 feet in mature height, and I took those out. So it seemed like the 30-foot height mature, not that all trees necessarily will get to maturity these days, which is a kind of a sad reality. But you know, in an ideal world where every tree planted grows and flourishes to their mature height, it's not likely that they would flourish in these two small sites. So I took them out. I left the slightly larger mature height ones in because of their upright nature. So it might appear that like, oh, a 25-foot one is going to be too big, but when you consider the shape or the habit of the tree itself, it's much more long or tall rather than wide. If that, so So that's one thing to consider. You can kind of see it in the specs for this canopy spread, that it doesn't, it's not like 4 times the height and spread. It's not that. So they're much more like, they're tall and their branches extend upwards as opposed to outwards, like, you know, some of our majestic oaks that we see. So I took the liberty and went ahead and just removed any tree that had a mature height over 30 and left what we have here. So we have a relatively small list, but they have been updated from the 2013 list, if that makes sense.
Pam, can you scroll down a little? Is that all of the 2.5 to 3? Okay,
Yes.
so that's all of them.
Yeah, so it's much reduced. I think that's kind of what Dante and John were kind of hoping for.
I do appreciate that you did do the 25-foot mature height. I think that just generally, I think that all of these trees will still maybe have some issues in the 2.5, 3. But if a homeowner is willing to say this is an option that the city is giving us and we want to replant in that same spot, acknowledging the issues that it could happen, I think that we're okay with.
Yeah, I think we could put a caveat on any tree that we put in anywhere humans
Yeah,
are.
but it's a little different. It's a little different whenever it's a developer and something has happened within the first 5 years or something, and the homeowner feels like it should be on the developer. And it's also, we have different kind of responsibilities at years of maintenance and stuff like that. So I think that the 2.5 to 3 is where we, as the right-of-way manager or taking care of, or the maintenance of the right-of-way, we're just worried with recommending something in 2.5 to 3 that may not live as well as it should, or may cause other issues with the infrastructure. And I'm happy that you put options, and I'm happy that we've gone down to the 25. And I still almost think like there should be some type of asterisk on options and something written at the bottom of this 2.5 to 3 list that says this area of planting may not be the most viable area of planting for what we're, trying to accomplish, which is a sustainable right-of-way.
Right.
And a canopy that works, right? Like if we put a crepe myrtle right behind the sidewalk and it flourishes, it's going to be a lot more economically viable to the city or to the tree canopy than a small crepe myrtle, right? That's like a bush in a 2.5 area, and it's gonna not be, as beautiful as it could be. So just
Right. Well,
that's all.
I was gonna say that maybe if we want to have a caveat or some sort of like, notice, problems come up with these really narrow planting strips and trying to plant there, it might be good to put that into whatever document that the developers or whomever is going to look at, because they're probably not going to find it in the planting list, right? They're not going to read the whole thing and find the small print here. They're just going to like find a tree that looks good and then they're done, is my expectation. I can't hear you, sorry.
Yeah, but I don't think that just generally developers aren't going to be a 2.5 to 3 foot planting strip.
Right, so
They're
this
gonna
isn't
be
for
a
them
5 foot.
anyway.
But this is for the homeowner, right? The homeowner who comes in, who just had a sidewalk problem with their 2.5 foot planter strip that has a tree in there, and the city says, Yeah, you can remove that tree. We're gonna pay you for the sidewalk to get fixed. And then you have to replant a tree in that same location. And in the 15
So
years
I'm sorry, I have to jump in here
all
because
right, go ahead.
that's a big conversation that's happening at the staff level. And there's still a lot of back and forth, and there's a lot to discuss with that sidewalk replacement program. But the city commission very specifically asked the NRC to look at a recommended planter strip size. So I want to look at the staff report to make sure that I'm saying this right, but they requested that the NRC identify the minimum width of a planter strip sufficient for planting. And so I think that's what the committee needs to discuss. And this is amazing work that you have done, Samantha, putting together this list, because we would not have known where to start with it. So this is immensely helpful. But I think the question has to come back to the Natural Resource Committee of what do you believe is sufficient? And kind of going back to what the chair was saying a few minutes ago, if the committee believes that 2.5 to 3 feet is not sufficient, that's your recommendation, or what you've researched and discussed. So that's I think where this needs to go. I was looking at the 3 questions that were posed to the NRC, and you got down the planting detail. So check, awesome work there. And we're around this question of what's an appropriate size for a planter strip, given that there will not be a new subdivision in this city that's 2.5 feet or 3 feet, where the planter strip is 3 feet. So that's kind of the question where we're at. And then the other question is reviewing the list with attention to species that won't cause damage to the adjacent sidewalk. So that I think would look at, root structures, and I'm not sure where you're at on that piece of the commission's request, but those are kind of the 2 outstanding discussion points. So Chair, I don't know if you want to kind of talk about either of those 2 things, or where you would like to go.
Well, when this started, this 2.5 to 3 foot, these were required or recommended trees. I would strongly urge the city to change city code so that, and the only time somebody really has to plant something is if they cut a tree down, for whatever reason, and they're then required to replant. I think what we need to do is in this 2.5 to 3 foot, change the city code so that if the tree does get diseased and they take it down, they're not required to replant. I've seen some of these species around town, just in the M'Laughlin neighborhood, and pretty narrow strips, this 2.5 to 3 foot size, doing fine and not messing up the sidewalk. So, but I think it also depends, you want to have a homeowner who actually takes care of their trees. And so I think if it wasn't required, when it's required, people just put in whatever that they can find cheap because they have to do it. I think if it wasn't a requirement that you had to replant, a lot of people may not replant that strip. They may not put a tree in, or, and if you put, you're not required to replant. There is an option that these potentially will do okay. You're going to have to keep an eye on them, or you could plant a tree on your lot that's not in the right of way as an option. And I think city code needs to change, and that's not something that we really need to do, but I would like to see the city change the code so that you're not required to replant trees in that small space if you have to take what's there out. And right now,
that's an excellent place to start for the rest of the Natural Resource Committee to weigh in on. I think you have a lot of good arguments and justification there. And I think that's what we would take forward to the commission to, if, you know, with any recommendations to change the code. But I would want that to be the kind of consensus or a majority opinion, if you will, from the committee. So I'm not sure if anybody else shares that opinion.
What do the rest of you guys think?
Well, it makes sense to me. It's not a great spot. They generally struggle to plant, and when they do well, it's great. You're not going to get a large, significant canopy tree out of a 2.5-foot strip, at least not without, you know, breaking up some concrete. So it makes sense to me to not require people to plant in there if they don't have to.
Yeah. I mean, I can write something up once we approve the street tree list, I could write something up in terms of, you know, what we're recommending that the city change code. So if they do cut a tree down in this 2.5 to 3 foot planting strip, that the homeowner not be required to replant.
Do you want to require them to replant on private property, or
Do that, they wouldn't have to replant in the parking strip, that they could instead replant something on their private property.
or is there opportunity for paying a fee in lieu or something like that?
That would be another option, and I think that would be up to whether the city thought that was okay. But again, we're not going to get really viable street trees from this little tiny strip. You know, 3 feet, you can get some fairly decent trees, but they're not tall, they're short. But I can't, 2.5, it's like, yeah.
Are you okay if we stop sharing for just a moment, just so we could have a discussion, or did you want to go through the list some more?
Let's talk about this 2.5 to 3 foot, because that seems to be the biggest issue. Everyone else kind of agrees that the other ones seem fine, but what are the rest of you guys? Chris, Devin, Ryan?
For me,
if
I
I could
mean,
just-
for
I'm
me, I
sorry,
was going to say
Devin,
that you know, Nancy and Samantha and Chris are kind of the consummate experts on this, so I tend to align my position with them. So not much to add on my end. I would just put myself in alignment with them.
Okay. And I'm getting a thumbs up from Brian.
Yeah,
And-
I feel the same way that Devin just expressed, that I agree with what you guys have shared here, and we'll continue based on your advice.
Chris?
I just want to recap the discussion over the past 20 minutes or so. So what we're saying is that no new developments are recommending street tree plantings with anything less than a certain median width. Is that true? Like that most of the new developments, or
No new development in Oregon City has a planter strip that's less than 5.5 feet.
cool.
All new developments, planter strips are 5.5 feet. What
Cool.
we're talking about right now is the 2.5 to 3 foot planter strips. And those are generally in the older areas of the city that are
Right.
already developed. And there generally would be replantings done by existing homeowners.
Understood. Okay, so yeah, it only applies to the older neighborhoods, and it applies to when a existing street tree dies or is removed, and the proper approach to replacing that or kind of offsetting that removal. Yeah, the only stipulation I would make is that you know, you plant on private property where space is available, because a lot of these lots are smaller. So if we can come up with some sort of alternative that isn't paying a fee in those cases, that would be great.
Or people in my neighborhood, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can think of plenty of lots where you know, the structure itself takes up the majority, and I can't think of a good, you know, viable planting spot.
Yeah.
So I guess, yeah, just be specific with the language and say, where it's feasible to do so, replant on private property.
Yeah.
Chris, can I ask a question? Would-
Yeah.
Are you thinking that would be required, or was that still under an optional setting where if they wanted to plant, then we would encourage them to do so on private property? Or were you saying that if they're removing a tree in these narrow planting strips, the requirement would be to either pay or plant on
I don't
private property?
I don't like the idea of forcing homeowners to pay to plant something, because like in the case of some of these, like the streets have been widened dramatically in the McLaughlin neighborhood. And I think a lot of the planting strips are so small because what used to be a very narrow street is now a really huge wide street, and they lost, I think the parking strips were a lot wider in many places to begin with, because I know, like I was saying, the street in front of my house is really wide, but you go one block up and the street is narrow again. And so there's a lot more, and I don't have sidewalk anyway up there on the street, but there's a lot more places to plant trees on the street above me than there is on my place, because of the nature of the road being that wide. So it'd be like penalizing homeowners for a decision the city made way before. I mean, I've been in my house for almost 40 years now. So, and the neighborhood was like this when I moved in, but I can tell that the road has been widened before that. But, to penalize homeowners because they live on a really wide street that is wide because the city made it wide, which then made the planting areas smaller, that to me is not really fair. And if you don't have room on your lot, I would say, I like what Chris said, if you have one of these really narrow spaces and you have to remove the street tree, that the option would be to plant on your lot if you have room, if there's available space.
Mhm.
Because we're also talking of putting accessory dwellings on people's lots, and some of these lots, they're so small, you put an accessory dwelling on and there's no room for trees on the lot.
So what just to make sure, in the 2.5 to 3, the NRC believes or is recommending that a replanting be optional.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
yeah.
So there's no requirement, like if they're taking the tree out, there's no requirement to put another tree in.
Yeah, I think that would be the best way, and we could put that you should put one on your lot if there's room, but if there's no room on the lot, we can't require them to plant it on the street or even to put it in their lot. Because if there's no room in their lot, and again, some of these houses take up pretty much the entire lot, or there's already some trees on the lot that take up what little bit of the lot is not taken up by the house.
Just, I think that may need to be discussed a little bit more, just to ensure that there's knowledge of where all the 2.5 trees are.
Right.
And kind of knowledge of what the tree canopy looks like there. I'm not saying I don't agree. I'm just making sure that
Right.
that's clear.
Yeah, plus we need to come up with the distinction of, where is it feasible to plant on private property and where is it not? Like,
Right.
is it at percentage of lot coverage that your building is, or how much room you have available? Yeah, there's factors there that are worth looking into.
And how many trees you have on your lot. Like I said,
Exactly. Yeah.
I have one of those 3-foot planting strips. And I've got a maple that the county planted about 35 years ago, and it's way too big. When I redid my sidewalk, because it was falling apart, the city sidewalk guy came and had us put curves so there's room. So it's not actually disrupting the sidewalk, but the roots are just, it doesn't belong in that spot. It's way too big of a tree for that spot. But until it starts messing things up, it's going to stay there. But again, if I had to remove that tree and they said, well, you got to put one on your lot, I don't have any room. I've got a black wall, because I like trees. So I have trees all over my lot. And there's absolutely no place I could put another tree, or I would already have one there. So I kind of live in a forest. But so, you'd have to be something the size of lot, but also what's already on your lot. If it's all just a big lawn, then you've got room for a tree, but I don't have room for trees. And I have a big lot, but I don't have room for trees because it's full of trees. So that would be something, but I agree that's something we need to have a more detailed conversation of. Maybe I can write something up and send it out before the next meeting and we can talk about it a little bit. Although I'd kind of like to get this street tree to the city, to be honest, this list. So maybe we could do it with the caveat that the 2.5 to 3 was optional, and that, we were going to work on making a recommendation to have the city change code so it wouldn't be, if you had to remove a street tree in that small area, you would not be required to replant in that parking strip. And we were trying to come up with other options to make sure that the tree canopy for the city was still maintained.
And as a committee, I think what you can do is kind of that brainstorming. And then we can try, look at how it actually would be implemented in code. So I don't know that you all need to try to do that, but what you all should be thinking about is kind of your goal with the tree canopy, what's going to work in the planter. Do you want, some kind of replacement, even if it's not in the planter, like those kind of questions. And then we can kind of figure out like, how would this actually work in practice, and start bringing that back to you. So
Maybe I'll start walking around my area a lot, because there's a lot of those 2.5 to 3 foot spots in my neighborhood. And so maybe I'll start walking around and seeing what's in there. And if they cut that down and had to put a new tree somewhere, could they put it? I mean, the guy down the street, in fact, his tree was lifting the sidewalk because I tripped on it. And the city made him, he actually got the sidewalk fixed. He didn't have to tear the sidewalk up. He did some kind of a little jury rig thing, which was fine. Yeah, and it's fine now. I don't trip on it anymore. But he's already got trees in his front yard. So there wouldn't be any place, and he's got trees in his backyard, and he's a renter anyway. So, but he really wouldn't have room to put more trees. So I'll walk around and see, for the neighborhood, whether I think forcing people to put a tree on private property, if they had to replace the one in that parking strip on their land, if most of them even have room for that, because that's what I don't know. I'm the only person with a big lot. They put the house, there were no setbacks in 1912 or whenever they built my house. So I have a garage directly on the property line. So the side of my garage is my neighbor's backyard. And then my house is right next to the garage. And I have this huge yard, but it's only because my house wasn't put in the middle of the lot. So I have this great big yard, which I love. It's partly why I bought it. But yeah, it's just crazy. Setbacks? What are those? And their garage is on my property line. So, we share, we have garages right next to each other's places. So it works. But yeah,
So
I'll
just have-
look around and see what I can think of. And maybe I'll just write something up and send it to the committee. And you guys can weigh in, and then we can, approach the city with, this is what we're thinking. We don't know city code well enough, but, this is kind of what we've seen. And Chris, if you walk around the neighborhood, you might take some, let's do the same thing I'm doing. Just walk around and look at people who have really narrow parking strips, and if they possibly could put another tree somewhere on their property. Because again, a lot of those lots are really small. Do we want to look at the rest of the list? Well, it hasn't seen.
It's up to you. There's not a whole lot of changes. I don't know if the
Let's kind
group.
of run through it rapidly for maybe Aquila, because she hasn't really seen it before. And since
Okay.
we are new.
Yeah, happy to. So yeah, I didn't change much from the last time folks have seen this. The only changes I made was I took out any of the species that we recommended place on hiatus.
Mhm.
And I put that on a separate list that the city staff can curate and have at their in their records, just so they know that there is a distinction between the recommended list and the hiatus list. So it's all in the same file if you're curious to see the Excel file I'm working in, but I just kind of took them out and put them in a new tab, if that makes sense.
I think it would be valuable for us to make a note, have like maybe a cover letter to the city when we send this to them and say why we put these trees on hiatus. A lot of it was
Sure.
maples. There's just too many maples, and there's, what you do if your canopy gets dominated by a specific type of tree and some pathogen comes through, that you don't have a tree canopy anymore. I mean, I was in the Midwest when Dutch elm disease went through, so I know the ramifications of that.
Yeah.
We're looking at issues with maples. The emerald ash borer is in Missouri, so it's made it to the Midwest. It's only a matter of time before it gets here, and it literally is wiping out every ash tree. We have a lot of native ashes, but we also plant them as ornamentals, so we took ashes off. So any tree that we thought was way too common, maples, we took some species off because it turns out that they're invasive. And so they're starting to form seedlings everywhere. And so we took plant trees off that had invasive. So it might be nice to just comment, those were removed, but it might be good to have just a small note of why we put trees on hiatus, like the maples at some point in the future. If this, if we get a pretty, and this is why we need a tree inventory, because we actually don't know how many of any trees are, which trees are really dominating, and if maple really is that much, although there are a lot of maples, just what I can see. But if some point in the future we decide that maybe we should put some more maples in, we could take those off the hiatus and put them back on the list again in the future. So it might be good to have, for the city to have a reason why we put things on hiatus. So
Right. So until we get that inventory, which would then we would have data-driven decision-making in these cases, we can go into further detail about why we took some of the maples off, or at least thinned the maple options at a different time. I
Yeah.
do want to respect everybody's time. It's getting close to 8. So
Yeah.
let me just kind of skip through. So I took everything off that we said we wanted to take off. That included species of trees that have a lot of problems, not just necessarily because of pests, but also because of pathogens, and because they tend to have poor resiliency in regards to drought and wood strength, so ice storms. So yeah, so trees that tend to have weak wood pathogens that weaken the health of the tree in general, we took off. And we also took off those trees that tend to just decay rather quickly, like the plums, for example. There's a lot of flowering plums that are popular because they have really pretty blooms in the spring, but really poor wood strength and resiliency. So those are just some examples. And then in their place, we have more resilient, more tolerant to drought, more tolerant to ice storms, and also more diversity. So less likely to be impacted from the more common diseases and pests that are due to a kind of very small, poorly diverse canopy. So the goal was to strengthen our canopy, not just in terms of wood strength and tolerance, but also in terms of resistance to pests and pathogens. And these particular species were recommended to us by knowledgeable folks from ODF, from the Portland Urban Forestry Program, and others. So I'm happy to go into more detail, but and I also moved some species around that were just too big for some of these smaller planting strips.
we've got bigger trees. The bigger the planting strip, the bigger the trees, because the roots, it'll be able to contain the roots and the tree. So
Right. And the goal to have larger trees, of course, is to have a more substantive canopy, which is one of the goals of our comprehensive plan. So if you want to have a nice shady tree on a street, you need a big planting strip. And if anyone asks me, I'll say that 5.5 feet is too small. And it's kind of a luxury to get an 8-foot planting strip. And it might find that you get those larger planting strips in more, high income areas. But I would ask any developer, if they asked me, to shrink the road, grow the planting strip. That's me. So
Yeah.
anyway,
Agree.
any more questions about the street tree list?
I had a question, I had two. I had a question about the hiatus trees. Is there, maybe this has been discussed, but is there a time frame of when those are recommended, like we revisit, or we look that if this gets adopted, is there a time frame like we should go back and revisit those every certain amount of time, or not, or?
Could you ask the question again? I'm not quite understanding.
Yeah, the ones that have been moved to the hiatus list, is that in perpetuity, or do we go back and revisit their appropriateness over a period of time?
So my answer to that would be if we get an inventory and we see what our diversity looks like in reality, we will say we have this much percentage of our urban canopy is these species. And it's probably going to be a very small number, right? Compared to what would be ideal. And in Portland, for example, like over 30%, over, a good chunk of their urban forestry canopy is composed of maples. And that's a common story for many urban forests across the entire country, not just Portland. So I assumed, and I'm probably not wrong, that we're not terribly different, is my saying. We probably don't have a different planting regime than Portland, than Corvallis, than Ashland, than, Vancouver. So we have, similar tastes across the country in terms of urban canopy, and they tend to skew to maples. And maples are, if you have too much of one species in your canopy, it's ripe for an attack of either pathogens or pests. And then once they arrive, your canopy disappears rapidly, which creates not only a dearth in canopy, but also an increase in damage costs and replacement. So it's a hedge in multiple concerns. So I would say data-driven. When we
Right.
get an inventory, it says we have this much canopy of maples and it falls below a certain threshold, we could say, okay, to add more maples. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
So do we want to vote on adopting this street tree list and then maybe work on developing some cover letter to send to the city commission when we send the street tree list to them? Explaining kind of what we did, and Sam could explain who helped with this list, which I think would be really important to know for the city, like how we came up with this list. The fact that we recommend that they change city code for the 2.5 to 3 foot space, and why we put the maples on hiatus, and how we made decisions to remove some of the trees, based on what broke and took out all the power lines in the ice storm and what did terrible in the 117-degree day. Those were the two big driving factors for removing a lot of the trees. So if we could come up with a cover letter, I think, we could send it around to the whole committee and have people weigh in on things and make changes and edits as they see fit. But, I'd like to just move on with this. And, Sam's done a tremendous amount of work, and I really appreciate every he did, because we
Yes,
would
thank you.
be here without Sam and her work into this. But if everybody agrees to this list, then I would suggest that we vote to send it to the city commission. And that I'll start drafting a cover letter and then I'll send it to Sam to add the stuff about how she developed it. And then we can send it around to the whole committee and everybody can start weighing in and editing. And when we feel that that's where we want it to be, then we can forward that cover letter with our street tree list to the city commission. So anybody against that or want to hold off or?
I'm not against it. I'm actually all for it. I'd love to vote to adopt as quick as possible. I feel like we've all spent enough time with this, but I do want to say that I would love to have a like crystal clear guardrail of when to reevaluate the hiatus list.
Hmm.
Like, let's like pick a number, make it a year, make it 5 years. I don't know what the number is, but just define that and make it so that when that time comes, whether it's us or the next version of this committee or whatever, there's a trigger to say, let's look at it again, as opposed to not defining it. And I think that's maybe speaking to Teresa's point a little bit of, let's make sure we're crystal clear on not letting the hiatus list fall off the edge. I think Samantha's exactly right that we need to have a clear inventory so we can operate in a data-driven way. But why not have a automatic reevaluate timeline also?
If we hired a forester for the city, realistically, how long till we had some semblance of an inventory? How many years would that take? Anybody have a feel for that? Sam, you helped with the Portland one. Do you have any idea?
So Portland has millions of trees, of
Yes, I know.
course. And they had a whole program of, over 50 staff involved in their urban forestry program. And they also had AmeriCorps volunteers. And I think they did it in 6 years.
Okay.
So with similar, we could do it in a year. With current resources, it would only be done by like the rogue, advocate, which the city could not then support.
Right.
So that would take them probably 10 years. So between 6 and 10 years is what I can say.
So what I can say about that is during my research for the Forester program, I got with the city GIS mapping system. And we do have a quantity of street trees, a quantity of park trees, a quantity of legacy trees, quantity of heritage trees, quantity of heritage grove trees, and then an acreage of canopy, including private acreage that we know. What we don't know are types and exact locations. So
And it's the types is what we really need to know.
yeah, types would be the
as to-
big kicker there, but there is at least a mapping system to work on.
So it's a start. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so just capturing species alone would be great to build a useful street tree list. But in terms of just like, Dante's whole infrastructure, he's got many more specs of what's in the ground than types,
Mhm.
right? So I would say condition of the tree is valuable because we can say that we plant so many trees a year and we have so many trees in the city, but that doesn't tell you what your canopy looks like or what you can project it to look like in 10 years. So if ever Oregon City wished to adopt a carbon sequestration credit program with the urban forestry as the sequestration, you can't build a program on species alone.
Right.
So you would need more data,
Right.
you know, records, more schema records than that. But yeah, species alone would be useful for the street
decade?
tree list.
Would it be reasonable to say a decade that we think the Natural Resource Committee should review this in a decade or sooner if we get a city tree inventory done?
I
So
think
that
as
was
soon
what-
as the inventory was done, we could do it right away, because then we
Right.
would know
Right.
what
So,
work to do.
you know, if you're saying it could take 10 years, so if we say we're suggesting that this street tree list be re-examined and the hiatus list be re-examined in 10 years or sooner if we get a tree inventory done. 'Cause
That's
then-
what I was going to suggest, Nancy, was why don't we tie the reevaluation to actually having an inventory that's done? Because then it kind of acts like a little bit like a carrot too. Just, hey, if we get this data, then we can make an assumption. But right now we've got a hypothesis, and that's that maples are overpopulated. It's the best that we can do right now, and that's why they're on the hiatus list. But if we have more data, then we come back and we reevaluate it versus just throwing some random number that's out there. It's like, oh, it's been
Yeah.
10 years and we still don't have a tree inventory. Uh-oh, like I
Yeah.
guess we'll do the same thing.
Yeah, we would be doing the same thing at that point. I have faith that we'll get a forester and then we'll actually get a tree inventory done because that's about the first thing they start looking at. Well, what's out there? Yeah. But, yeah, we could just say we're going to review it, after the next tree, when we get the tree inventory done. We'll take a look at the list and the hiatus list and make recommendations. That would be a good time to do another recommendation list, was after we have that data. So I agree with that. Let's just put it after the tree inventory is done.
I
Because
want to argue or advocate for the idea of 2 trigger points, because if we just say we're going to do this when the tree inventory is done, there is a potential out there that the tree inventory will never get done. And I hate to say that to this group, because I will advocate with all of us to do the tree inventory as quickly as possible. But I think having 2 triggers for this action to take place, one being a timeline and one being the tree inventory, kind of protects us on either side.
So should we keep the 10 years or sooner after the tree inventory is done? Because then that's a carrot that if we get that done sooner, we'll do the tree inventory.
Yeah, I think 10 years is, in my opinion, that's like safe. I think it's assuming we're going to get the tree inventory done, but if we don't, at least we put some language down, something in writing that we're going to revisit.
Yeah, the next committee would be pressuring the city to get that tree inventory done.
They don't want to come back to the hiatus list.
No.
Sounds good to me. 10 years.
I'm in alignment with that.
Okay. So let's, anybody in disagreement who doesn't want the street tree list adopted, I'm just gonna go that way instead. We can all vote, but I think we're all tired of it, so.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say we're gonna adopt the street tree list. We voted unanimously to adopt the street tree list. I will work on I told the mayor in January that we were going to get it to her in February. So getting it to her, or that I was going to get it to her in January. So getting it to her this month would make me very happy, and it'd make her very happy, I'm sure too. So I will start writing a cover letter, like a memo that would go to the city with the street tree list. And I will send it to Sam so she can add the details about how we actually did the inventory. And then I'll send it out to the rest of us, to Chris and Devin and Brian. And so you guys can weigh in and make comments and suggestions, and feel free to edit it, Will. Find my bad grammar. Okay. Yay. Does anybody
Thank
have
you,
Great
Nancy.
plan.
Huh? What?
That's a great plan.
Yeah.
Thank you, Nancy.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Is there anything else? I know a lot of times we have communications. I have one communication. Last time we met, we voted to send an email or send a recommendation of the Heritage Tree Hero for for this year, Dee Dee is, and the parks people are behind Dara Kramer, who is one of the teachers at Gardner, and she's been instrumental in getting this huge old oak on the school property designated a heritage tree. I don't think they've gotten it to us yet. I have no idea what's happening with heritage trees. There's so much going on in the city. I'm not sure that everything's, it's probably on somebody's desk maybe. But anyway, she has, and they have written a very nice letter, and they have officially nominated her. And I told her that the Natural Resource Committee would be more than happy to send an email that said that we also support her receiving the Heritage Tree Hero Award. And last time we voted on that, but it was just Sam and I. So Chris and Brian and Devin are you behind that as well. And I got the email from Sandy or from Dee Dee today telling me that they finally got the form done and are sending it out. So I'll probably write that email tomorrow too.
Yep, in alignment,
I'll
Nancy.
support that.
Okay. It's going to be a really short and sweet email. Are there anybody else? Anybody have any communications?
My only one is that Arbor Month is coming up in April. And we had talked a little bit about an activity that we might do, but one of the main things for the city to know is that we have to have some sort of proclamation to qualify. So I'm hoping I might hear some ideas about what staff or the mayor or the commission might be interested in doing to formally recognize Arbor Month as a requirement of Tree City USA. So that's all.
Yeah.
Well, we had discussed the possibility of actually organizing the old Kenema Park invasive removal workshop to be paired with a tree planting there in Old Kenema Park. That was one possibility, although from what I recall, it was somewhat open-ended. So I suppose we need consensus on that, or look for a different idea. I'm certainly
We
up.
talked about that, I think last summer we talked about that. And I, at that point, emailed the person who was the head of the Kenema Neighborhood Association, because that seemed like a good place to start to get them on board. And I never heard back. So I can try sending another email to the head of the neighborhood association and see if he would be on board, because we really need the neighborhood association in if we're doing something like that.
Neighborhood association, or perhaps a good starting point would be with the Parks Department itself,
Yeah,
since it is kind of their purview.
it is, but it's their neighborhood. So I know if we got a hold of the McLaughlin neighborhood, they'd be more than happy to let us do anything we wanted to in Waterford Park that would help. They're always organizing stuff. So seems like we should. Maybe I'll email the Kenema guy again and Parks as well. Who should I email in Parks?
Well, I think his name is John, but before you email Parks, Kelly Reed in planning has started coordinating with Parks. So we could, you could get in touch with her. She's also already been in conversation with Friends of Trees, and they have the startings of an event planned for April
2nd.
Thank you, April 2nd in Chapin Park. And then, there we go. I'm not sure what time of day yet. And then Friends of Trees has, I think, some events that they're planning kind of throughout the month. We do have a proclamation that Kelly will prepare and will go to the City Commission April 6th, I believe. And so maybe what we should do, if there's anything more that this committee would like to do, is perhaps maybe have Kelly come to the next meeting see if you have any ideas and maybe we can coordinate that way. Or maybe just we'll start an email conversation because I worry if we wait for the next meeting, we'll run out of time.
Right, yeah. And I'm actually thinking it's kind of too late to start organizing major cleanup campaigns for a park at this point when we don't have anybody involved. We've just been throwing it out, but we could start talking to them and maybe for the next year and then maybe do something, if she's doing something at Chapin Park, maybe we should just start promoting that more and do something
Yeah.
that's already starting to be organized.
Yeah. And so what we could do then is whatever kind of media is coming together around that, which I don't know what that is yet, but at least forward that out to this committee. And then you'll have that. You can help advertise that however you like.
Right.
Yeah. So
Can
we
you
could
send me an
kinda start
email
there.
with Kelly's email in it?
Mhm. For
Great.
sure.
Thanks. Other communications? Future agenda items. I know that Jerry Herman's coming to one of the meetings, I think next month.
Yeah, that's kind of that ball's kind of in his court. He's been the one asking to have it pushed out. So I think Aquila and I are having a meeting with him tomorrow and maybe get a better sense of where he wants to go with that presentation.
Right, and I know you emailed me and asked if it was okay if you gave him,
Yeah.
or if I wanted to give him emails, and I answered, and then I found that email had never gone out. I had a whole bunch of emails. Something happened to the email server at Linfield. It went down for a while, and so any emails I wrote in that time period
Oh.
went into some file, and I didn't even know where they were. It just popped up at some point. I'm like, great. So anyway, I would say feel free to give him our email addresses. I have no problem with Jerry, and it was Doug getting a hold of us.
Okay.
We've talked to Doug a lot and Jerry. So they were on this committee for a long time. Doug was the chair forever and the mayor and everything else, and John McLaughlin. And so, yeah. So send me an email and I'll get a hold of Kelly. Send me her email and I'll get a hold of her and start a conversation with her about Arbor Day stuff and see what the
Okay.
city has planned. And maybe we can just jump in on that for this year. And
Yeah.
then start talking about our idea for Kanema Park, and maybe for next year, start doing something, or maybe even do an event, in the fall or something.
Will do. Good idea.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else have anything for the good of the order before my voice completely goes away? Okay, I call this meeting adjourned. See you guys next month, but you'll be in touch. I will be sending you all an email with a note for the city commission so we can send them the tree list. So, okay, I will see you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, gang.